Lucy Jung joins us from Cambridge, England. She is the founder and CEO of Charco Neurotech, a MedTech startup that developed a non-invasive device to ease the mobility symptoms associated with Parkinson's disease. She joins the show to discuss the importance of technological innovation for medical breakthroughs and applying her background in industrial design to improve the quality of life for millions of people worldwide suffering with Parkinson's symptoms. Lucy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me today, Brian.
Let's begin by explaining to our audience who may not know the basics of Parkinson's. What is the typical quality of life like for patients prior to the development of your device, which we'll talk about in a few moments?
Of course. So, unfortunately, Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurodegenerative condition in the world. There's 10 million people around the world who are suffering from this condition. In the UK alone, there is about 145,000 people, and every hour there will be two people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's, which is unfortunately an incurable condition at the moment. Lots of people with Parkinson's will be getting a medication of levodopa, and they manage their symptoms using that, as well as other medications. Some go into deeper stimulation surgery. There's like a physiotherapy classes and so on. But what we would see from people with Parkinson's is that despite their current best medicated status, there are lots of them are left with symptoms, lots of them being a motor but also non-motor symptoms of stiffness, slowness, tremor, issues with the gait, swallowing, constipation. So there are lots and lots of symptoms that are caused by Parkinson's. So the quality of life is a real focus that we are trying to resolve here.
And how did you become interested in this particular disorder?
Great question. So when I was studying at Imperial College and Royal College of Art, Innovation Design Engineering, I was actually really looking into long-term conditions that were incurable. So I was studying multiple sclerosis, people who had stroke, insensitivity to pain, and so on. But Parkinson's was one of the sector that I really got dived into because I have to say, people who I've met who were really frustrated because of the symptoms that were there, how I felt is that they were almost caged into their own body. The first gentleman that I've ever met was saying that I'm really happy right now, but people constantly think that he's angry because of Parkinson's made his face stiff and now he can't smile anymore. And that really caught myself. And also, while we were working together with him, I was able to identify lots of things that technology can do to improve their quality of life. So that's how I kind of got into Parkinson's back in 2014, 15. So it's been quite of a while that I was really interested in bringing technology or services that can improve the quality of life for people with Parkinson's, but also their family members and the healthcare providers as well.
Okay, so let's talk about your company's flagship product. This is CUE1, described as a vibrotactile stimulations device. So lots of big words there. Break it down for our listeners. Tell us how it came to be, what is it, and generally, how does it work?
Of course. So, all the things that we do at Charco is by talking with people with Parkinson's and people around them to really understand the needs and problems of their symptoms. While we were doing lots of interviews and observation study, we were able to see that lots of people were saying similar things where this stimulation seemed to help with their symptoms. Now, then we started looking into lots of different type of stimulation, including auditory or visual, tactile stimulation that we are currently working on. There was electric stimulation, vibrotactile stimulation that we can look into. So there were lots of studies behind that we worked together with clinicians and people with Parkinson's to identify what was it that really helped them. So throughout the years, what we were doing is lots of desktop research, but also meeting with lots of stakeholders to develop the Q1 device. We actually call it Q1.
Q1.
Yeah, so it is using a medical adhesive to sit on the sternum. And why sternum is another question that we get asked a lot, is that we actually test it in lots of areas of the body, but it is actually sternum that is showing the most benefit. The device uses a loop and hook system to get onto that adhesive to attach to the sternum, and with one press button, it delivers stimulation that combines focus stimulation and cueing. Now, going into the focus stimulation, it's a high frequency stimulation that is known to stimulate our body and the brain to reduce the beta oscillation that is increased for people with Parkinson's, which then limits individuals' movement, especially with stiffness, slowness, and bradykinesia. But with the focus stimulation, what they were able to see through the EEG testing is that it reduces the beta oscillation, which then leads on to improvement of their movement. Now, the cueing is an interesting one that has been used for visual cueing or auditory cueing with great benefit. Now we're using tactile cueing to give a sensation cueing. What it does is that it is proven to help with movement, especially with the walking and freeze of gait. So what we're seeing is that with just to go through the freeze of gait is when people are walking fine, and then they suddenly feel like their feet are stuck to the ground and they can't take their next step. If you give them a cueing, which is using auditory or tactile or visual, then they can use the stimuli to continue with their movement to avoid the freeze of gait. So what we were able to see is by combining focus stimulation and cueing, we were able to see that the Q1 device was able to give wide range of symptom benefit across the stages of Parkinson's. And this is something that we are really looking into, is what kind of stimulation is more beneficial of which subcategories of Parkinson's. So yes, our device is out there, but we're learning so much from people to basically optimize the stimulation for individuals to increase the efficacy of the device. So lots of studies that we've done, but also ahead of us.
So, help us understand from the device perspective. This is something you would wear all the time, correct? And then you would activate on an as need basis.
So great comment. So people are wearing it all the time. The interesting thing is, yes, we actually developed the device so that they're wearing it and then using it as they need it. However, we are now seeing the device being used all the time. So people are actually activating the device and they use it throughout their whole day. Most of them. Some people are even using it while they're sleeping, because there are lots of people who are actually commenting that it is helping with their sleep quality. So at the moment, as mentioned, more people seem to use it throughout their whole time through the day.
Are there certain people for whom it is going to be easier or harder to use a device like this, given maybe other conditions that they may be managing?
So that's a great comment. So at the moment, we designed the device to be suitable for individuals. Despite their movement limitations, they can use the device. So actually, the design, the usability was one of the most important parts. So to make sure that people with Parkinson's can grab it, really easily attached, really easily operated. But one thing is that with people who have severe tremor, for example, it is actually not very easy to attach the devices. But what we're looking into is an alternative way for us to help those people. For example, we are currently in the process of developing a strap that is easier for them to attach the device. So we tried our best to develop the current Q1 device in terms of usability, but we always see the opportunity to improve it, and that's what we are hoping to do with the Q1. Q2, Q3, and constant improvement is what we're looking for.
You mentioned there are stages to Parkinson's. Give us a little primer on those stages and if your device is useful at all stages or if it is particularly useful at a certain stage and maybe less so depending on how it's presenting at a later stage.
Of course, that's a great question. So, what we are looking into is that with the Honya Parkinson's stage evaluation, there's a stage 1 to 5, and 1 being the earliest Parkinson's. What we have done is that we really looked into we're trying to identify which stage and which subcategory of Parkinson's is more beneficial in what kind of stimulation parameters. Now, what we are seeing is that we are able to start to group those individuals. However, it's a long study that we're going to have to do more. But what we are currently seeing is that the studies have shown that it will show most benefit in stage 2 to 3. So that's what we've been looking into. But we're actually seeing quite a lot of benefit with stage 4 as well. So that's something that we're constantly doing more studies on. Who will see the most benefit? The primary symptoms that we're looking into is the slowness, rigidity, and stiffness in movement. But then, as mentioned, there are lots of people who are also seeing benefit with freeze of gait. So those are all the things that we are currently looking into on top of the things that people have mentioned to us. So, for example, lots of people were saying that it was helping with dystonia as well. So we're looking into those as well. So lots of studies, as mentioned, needs to go into.
Is there any indication that as you're treating the symptoms, that it helps to prolong the quality of life for those with Parkinson's?
So we that is something that we have to further obviously evaluate, but we definitely see lots of people who are actually going back to the activities that they enjoy to do, going back to walking, going back to playing piano, and going back to meeting with their friends and so on. I love when people say, oh, like I went to garden center, I haven't been there for ages. So those kind of, what we say is that it's as non-essential but essential, like the social activities that we do, the quality of life that is improved because of those are significant. So what we see is that by using the device, there's the primary effectiveness of reducing the symptoms, but also those secondary effect of really letting them carry on with what they used to love, like dancing, that really contributes into improving the quality of life. So yes, that's something that we have to further do a clinical trial on and to further prove. But what we are seeing at the moment is lots of people going back to what they used to do. I remember one of the story that I love the most is this lady who was saying that she had to stop going for dance classes because of her balance was really not helping. But with it, using the Q1 device, she went back to the dance class with the biggest smile, and that was the one of the biggest motivation for Charco's team members to constantly do further research and development to benefit people more.
Now, sometimes these medical devices are complementary to other treatments. So, as you're improving someone's quality of life and you're reducing some of their symptoms, there may be another medication or another drug or another treatment, course of treatment that's actually helping deal with, or in this case, perhaps slow the
Mm.
core disorder. Is that something that you are hopeful for in this field? Are there some medications that are trying to or are promising in slowing the progression of Parkinson's and then combined with your device that can truly extend people's quality of life and potentially how long they can live with this disease?
Yeah, I really do want to mention that the Q1 device has been tested on top of their medication status. So we wouldn't change their medication at all. So the benefit that we're seeing is on top of their current medicated status. So we actually mention clearly to people to not change their medication schedules. So what we are seeing is on top of the medication benefit, I think that's another key thing because lots of things that actually happens is that with the medication, there's on and off period. And what we were able to see is that people are saying their on period is actually prolonged with by using the Q1 device. So we see that it is a synergetic effectiveness together with the current care.
Are there any side effects or potential risks?
It's something that we are closely monitoring at the moment. We do actually see people who have extra sensitivity to adhesives. So we are keeping our close eye on to if they are extra sensitive or they have known side effects of the medical adhesives, then they shouldn't use the adhesives. That's the reason why we're developing the straps. In terms of the device itself, we are keeping our close eye onto whether they are feeling any side effects. There are not kind of conclusive side effects that is known right now, but we are constantly monitoring what people are saying. We've got about 1,000 and close to 1,500 people currently using the device. As mentioned, it's something that we're closely monitoring. We are monitoring the refund rate because that is caused because of no effectiveness, because we give full refund because we really strongly believe that we would only let people pay for it if it works for them, because that's the reason why Charco exists. We are currently looking into 4.1% of refund rate, despite we don't put any limitation on when they want to get the refund. So we're closely monitoring, once again, as mentioned, to make sure that the device is working for them.
Can you envision any application for this device beyond Parkinson's disease? Do you believe the technology could potentially be applied to other disorders?
This is something that is actively currently getting observed by academic clinical clinicians. So they are currently looking into whether the device can be useful for other conditions, that is Parkinson's plus syndromes. So it is not concluded yet. So I'm quite hesitant to mention, but
Sure.
there are other neurological conditions that we are potentially seeing benefit of. And I really do hope that we can help more people that are suffering from movement disorders. So yeah, we're really doing a lot of studies at the moment. As mentioned, we hope that we can bring more smiles beyond Parkinson's, but also we are focusing on what are the symptoms that are benefiting from the device as well.
Now, I don't believe that in the research that I did on you and your company, I don't believe that you personally have any formal healthcare training or education. Is that correct?
I do have Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Assessor qualification, but apart from that, no, I'm not a medical. I'm not a medic. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a Parkinson's nurse. So yeah,
So it's fascinating because you have an industrial design and an engineering background. You have formal education and innovation design engineering. As you mentioned, a little bit of exposure to healthcare training, but mostly in the pursuit of this device. And yet, your signature achievement so far is a medical device. So, why do you think it took somebody from outside the direct medical science field to be the first to develop a device like this?
I think it's actually it's focused on people. I always talk about how important it is for us to really listen to them and really I love saying like people who are experts in Parkinson's really is people who are living with Parkinson's. If you're living day to day, and also people around them, if you're living day to day with this condition, there are something that are really difficult to even describe that they go through. The key thing that I did is listening to people with Parkinson's and people around them to really understand what is their perspective of the difficulties, challenges, and needs, and also what is helping them. So, what I tend to ask is, what is most frustration for them, and is there anything that really helped them that they don't really understand why, but it really helped them? If you listen to them, there are actually really like innovative things that we wouldn't necessarily read from textbooks, which is real kind of words that are coming from their day-to-day experience, if that makes sense. And then what I do is I think it's actually really helpful because I'm not trained as a healthcare professionals, because I kind of start from baseline. I listen to clinicians, I listen to people with Parkinson's, their family members, to really understand what the problem is. And I try to consider all of their perspectives, if that makes sense. So it actually helps me to not prejudge this must be their problem. I just listen to them and try to focus on how can we resolve this using current technology or so on. And I have to say, yes, you mentioned that like how am I the first one? But the reality is that we work together with people around the Parkinson's. So we always had people with Parkinson's, organizations who are running Parkinson's, and also the clinicians and family members, and we collate all the needs and problems that they have mutually, and how we are going to resolve this by thinking in a bigger user experience point of view. So you'll be able to see that actually it's not about how we came up with the Q1 device. It's actually the process that Charco was able to take to identify the problems and to bring in the solutions. So it is a journey that is unique about Charco that is able to make the difference.
I don't know if you would know outside of the tools that you've developed and what you've been focused on, but you mentioned the process and how you were able to get from understanding the core problem and then being able to put a solution in the market. Is that common in the medical device field, or are you actually innovating the very process of innovation?
I actually would want to say we are taking quite unique process. So, but for design perspective, it's not that different. I guess the thing that we did is that bringing the user experience design when we are doing product development into the medical sector, but we had to take consideration of all other things. And the accelerator programs that we participated, which is one of them is a MedTech Superconnector, while we are carrying out the design thinking process, we were implementing all the things where the medical device sector needed. So, for example, healthcare, health economic analysis that we had to do, the regulations, clinical trials, and all these testings of the medical devices. All these things needed to be implemented within this design thinking and the process that we take for the user experience innovation. So I think it's a conjoint process that we took. So we came up with new process that we are taking, which is something that we are currently doing at Charco. But I cannot emphasize more of by being in this medical device sector, the core learning that I had to do as a product designer and innovation design engineer is actually this medical sector of working under ISO 13485, which is the good manufacturing project process for the medical devices, and we have to make sure that we are following to those process whilst working on the innovation process, if that makes sense.
It does, and that was what I was going to touch on next is the regulatory review requirements and process. So you've mentioned some of those. Um, Two questions. So I'll start with just how have you found managing the regulatory review environment for a medical device? Has it allowed you to stay on sort of a specific track, knowing that you're not cutting corners because there's a nicely defined regulatory process, or has it slowed down your ability to bring this to market?
Well, I have to say, like, it's gonna be a lie if I say it doesn't slow you down because it definitely is much more challenging that you have to go through regulations. There's so many more recordings, approvals, responsibilities. But for Charco, I think regulations is so important because it is talking about safety and efficacy of the device. The Q1 device, lots of people actually asked me about why didn't you just go for a well-being device? The reason why we went for medical device is because we appreciate the regulations of the safety and efficacy is absolutely needed for the sake of the patients and also the healthcare providers. So, for example, the testings that we have to do is much more rigorous, and the paperwork that we have to do with the technique, the development of the device, and also the the design of the PCB and all of those things are much more complicated. That's why we've got four people who are regulatory specialists within the team. I was just having a meeting with him as well, but it is just so important because the regulation is there to protect patients, and Charco is here to help people with long-term conditions. So I believe that it's very important. Yes, it does slow you down. Yes, you need to make sure all your business plan and the strategy goes with the regulations, but it is needed, is what I always mention.
And is there an international standard for medical devices, or do you have to adhere to multiple countries and regions standards?
every time that, well, not every time, because some of the countries does accept from other countries. So for example, CE marking does get accepted by other countries, specific countries. So what we do is we do study about which countries take CE marking or FDA into consideration. So, for example, Charco device is currently regulated in the UK. So we are sending out the devices. We are now, it was accepted as a CE marking before, but now we are going through the UKCA, for example. And then for the US, of course, we have to work on the FDA. So that's what we're working on. In South Korea, Japan, that's also, we have to go through the process. It does take time. It is quite heartbreaking to see when people with Parkinson's from abroad talking about why can't we have the device in this country, and we always explain to them about we are really working on this, and this is the reason why we have waiting lists for people with Parkinson's. They don't have to pay anything. There is no obligation or whatsoever for them to buy the device, but we want to understand which country the waiting list is coming from, so that we can make sure that we pay attention to countries so that we can go through all the process to get the devices for them. So uh, as mentioned, the reason why I have lots of regulatory team members is because we won't just say, okay, there's lots of people with Parkinson's in this area, let's go there first. We actually also take consideration of like everything. So just because there is like 10 people in one area, it doesn't mean that we will neglect it at all. It is very important for us to get the devices to people who need it. So we want to understand the demand, where it's coming from. So again, that's the reason why we've got waiting lists. And yes, it is quite different. There is like ISO 13485 is widely accepted. So there's like lots of studies that we are doing in terms of which regulations that we have to adhere to.
Do you feel like the review process for medical devices is either the same or more or less rigorous than for a traditional, let's say, pharmaceutical, a pill, a liquid, something you would actually ingest? Is it roughly the same safety efficacy requirements?
Well, I'm just going to quote other people on this because I didn't do my whole study on this sector. But what I've been hearing from regulatory specialists is that there is still quite a lot of things that are keeping that traditional process of pharmacological studies. And that is why even non-invasive devices have to go through quite things that doesn't necessarily always make sense, if that makes sense. But the good thing is that the regulators are currently working on adjusting these processes so that it makes things more sensible. So, for example, breakthrough. That is a really great scheme that are out there for the FDA so that it can support the process of the innovation to get into the market. This is not just breakthrough in the US, but there's lots of programs like this where they take under consideration of these innovations to get the devices or medications to the market so that people can actually benefit from them.
When you think about that topic of breakthrough, this is something that I think has vexed a lot of people who have various conditions and they see devices like yours or they see treatments out there that are not available in their country. You always want to make sure you have the safety right, and that often seems to be the biggest barrier. Is even if something demonstrates efficacy, if their safety profile they don't feel like it's big enough or strong enough, there's a hesitancy among some regulators to make that available. And I think we saw in the last couple of years with the advent of new treatments for a variety of things, including around the pandemic, the global pandemic, the debate that came up was how long is enough, and also how long is too long. At what point do we have enough safety data? For
Mm.
a medical device, do you have a view or an opinion that if you're going to see something on the negative side, you'd likely see it within a certain time frame, or are you of the belief that you actually do need to give these things potentially years so that we can ensure that nothing comes up further down the road?
That's a great question, I have to say. Do I have an answer? I do not think I have an answer, but I can share what I think it is. I think it always goes back to the risk and the benefit, if that makes sense. So the sectors where it is, for example, if it's a medical device class 3, let's say, it is implantable. that I would assume that it is, like we have to operate on them and so on, which means the risk is higher than the devices where you can just, for example, take it off straight away. Then we always want to balance that risk and benefit, which is actually the regulations. Regulations itself does look into how invasive is the device and what is the benefit. And then we constantly try our best to do the right thing, if that makes sense. And also, this is the reason why the primary the reasoning that what we say is the device is used for. So, for example, how is the Q1 device used? Is it used for immediate effectiveness, or is it saying that the claim is so important, if that makes sense? Of is it long-term use? Is it immediate use? Is it while they're using the device and so on. So this is another thing that we're constantly studying, as mentioned, is that our device initially was looking into the immediate effectiveness of the device. So they wear the device, they start the device, and we see the effectiveness. And we were able to see quite a significant improvement for individuals in average, so that we were able to get the devices out there. Now, what we're looking into with some of the hospitals is long-term effectiveness. So we currently have a paper that is coming out where we're looking into 4-month benefit, that is sustained benefit of the Q1 device. Now we're going to constantly follow them up. And then once it is cleared into the clinic, then we can go out and say in the claims of this is what we've been seeing. The person who've been using the device the longest, I believe it's about 2 years now. So we are constantly monitoring how long can we benefit the people, and constantly monitoring the side effects and very carefully looking into that as well. So once again, it's the risk and benefit that we want to look into and do as much as we can to mitigate those risks and avoid those risks before it happens. So being like, this is the another reason why I am kind of a big advocate of the regulation, is also post-market surveillance of looking into, once it goes on to people, what is it that we are seeing. So constantly monitoring that trend is very, very important as well.
Are there any critics, either of the work or just folks who take a critical eye to this particular form of technology? In science, I find that this is the best way to ultimately gain consensus, is to see some critiques, and maybe not even of your company, but just of the approach of the method. Are there folks out there who are saying, "Oh, this is a placebo effect. This is not directly attributable"? And how do you respond to any of those critics?
Well, I love critics, I have to say, because it's the only way for us to improve and also let us think about it. So we've got lots of our team members who are like, I have to say, I think because we're so critical to ourselves, you'll be able to see in our team, like lots of them are background from clinicians and academia. So we love challenging ourselves. So if you challenge us now, like placebo or the longer term effectiveness, whether the effectiveness wear off or so on, it's the questions that we're constantly asking before anyone asks us, because that is the core thing. Like we are the core philosophy that Charco have is that we just show the data that we're currently seeing. We don't overpromise, we don't underpromise, we just show what we're currently seeing. And I think it's so important that people are critical, not only the healthcare providers, but also patients themselves, because they need to look into whether this is right for them or not. So I always ask them to please do ask us questions if you have any. If you have any criticisms, please let us know so we can look into it. So, for example, like as mentioned, people saying like, oh, how do you know if the sternum is the best position? And this is the constant question that we have, because so far what we've been saying is the sternum has been the best place, and we allow people to try in other places. Because the literature says that any peripheral area, it will be having similar effectiveness. However, we are currently seeing sternum being the best position, and now we create a hypothesis of why is it that the sternum is showing most benefit. Now we talk about, as people age, like their sensation is actually more centric than the peripheral area, so that may be one of the reasons. So we are constantly looking into more studies and to take on those criticisms and work on that. So in terms of the placebo effect, for example, on our the publications, you'll be able to see that the UPDRS testing, the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, to a certain level, the placebo, it may be placebo, but then we are actually over the placebo. So we'll be looking into what is a clinically meaningful improvement when we are doing Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale. So we'll be sharing those data. So as mentioned, we are very much open to questions, criticism, so that we can think together and then improve ourselves for the sake of people with long-term conditions.
So speaking of the risk benefit of not only a treatment but also of the decisions that you make about your own life, I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about you and your journey into the leadership of this company. I'd love to know, aside from the inspiration for the product and what you're working on now, you also had to make that mental leap to start this company and to assume an executive leadership role, which it sounds like you have enjoyed and done a great job with. So, talk us through a little bit about what that was like, whether you had any thoughts about taking this idea to an existing company and becoming the product leader for it versus what you ended up doing, which is pursue your own path and lead your own company. Give us a little sense of what that thought process was like for you as you were going through it.
It's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. So I never thought I would be running a company, if I'm honest with you. My interest was always research and in academia. So my pathway that I thought that I'll be going through was actually studying more, doing PhD and becoming a professor into this innovation in healthcare. Um, but the reason why I decided to actually come out from the like graduating from university and to start Charco is because of the personal experience that I had. And to again, like make the long story short, in 2014, 15 times, when I was actually working on a project in Parkinson's, I got diagnosed with benign brain tumor, and I suddenly had to stop my career and go through the medications, all of them giving me a massive side effects where my visions were all disturbed and I couldn't even see properly. And then suddenly the clinicians saying, okay, you're going to have to go through the brain surgery at quite relatively young age. And then the surgery was really quite difficult, and the recovery and all those things really taught me about what it feels to be a patient, if I may say. It is a long-term condition because, like I couldn't take all of it out. So I still have to go for a regular checkup and all of those things. But it kind of changed my attitude into innovation in healthcare. And I have to say that I was actually really almost embarrassed that I was talking about I understand how it's being to be a patient, because when I actually became a patient, it was, I have to say, terrifying. And anything that you want to grab onto, you want to grab onto. So yes, all these like the everything is very, very important when it comes to medical devices and everything, but we also have to really remember these individuals. And I'll share one story, because this is another reason why I decided, okay, we will put everything into looking into how can non-invasive devices support people with long-term conditions, no matter what degree. One gentleman with Parkinson's, Richard, was saying, I was doing all the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale assessments, and I was doing all this research of is it clinically significant or is it not? And we were all kind of really obsessed with those data. And Richard one day was asking, like, Lucy, like, why are you doing all this measurement? And I was explaining to him why it's so important. And he said, but Lucy, please remember one story. He was on a train and he was traveling in London. It was his stop to get off the train, but because he got freeze of gait, he couldn't take that one step, and he was just going around and around on the tube all day. And he said, do you know what it would have mean if he could just take one step out from that train? And he told me to never forget that. And that really changed the way that I think. So yes, all the regulations, clinical trials, efficacies, and is all very, very important. I cannot emphasize it more, but to always remember what it really means for individuals who are living through these long-term conditions became very, very important mission for me to help that one step or 1% for individuals. If it helps one person in their life, like for me, I did my mission.
And obviously, I can tell, and our listeners can tell the passion that you have for this, as many entrepreneurs have for the businesses that they start. How have you been able to translate your passion to those who you are bringing into the company, as you want everybody who works with you and for you to have the same objectives, the same goals? What have you done to be able to keep the mission statement and the purpose of your company alive for everybody who comes to work? For you, maybe years after you originally had the idea and got started on your own?
We talk with each other a lot. I have to say, like, I cannot be more proud to be able to work with our team members. They're absolutely incredible people. So, like I always say, I'm so grateful that I'm working with them because they're so driven by the motivation of the benefits and the happiness that they're bringing to people. And they challenge me and they say, Lucy, we have to do this. And I say, yes, yes, go. And they are so self motivated because of the interaction that we have with people with Parkinson's. We visit them, we listen to them, and when they actually go and see the benefit that they're bringing to people, they are like really motivated. So I think all I'm doing is being able to connect them, the team and the community. So we call people with Parkinson's and their family members community members, and then we work together with them to understand each other. And it really motivates the team because the difference that they're making to individuals is so significant. So I'm just being in between and showing each other and the incredible jobs the team members are doing.
What is the best and worst part of your job?
Best part, it's really simple, I have to say. The best part is when we bring the device to individuals and it, like we can see their smiles and we see tears. It's really hard to hold tears, I have to say. So when it benefits them, it's the best part. The most difficult part is the opposite. So when we actually get the device for people and it disappoints them, for example, we try our best to calibrate the stimulation. It's not 100% working device. So when they get disappointed, we obviously try our best and we want to study more. That's why we study hard. So that's one part. The other thing is there's 16,000 people on our waiting list. And when we send out the email to say it's now their time to get the device and they tell us that someone passed away, they were waiting for the device, that is a real painful thing, I have to say, for not just me, for our whole team members. And that is why I think whole team is really motivated because we want them to get the device. We want at least them to try it and see if there's any benefit so that they can have a peace of mind of yes, we tried it, whether it worked for them, whether it didn't work for them. If it didn't, then we'll try our best and so on. So it's a very clear the best part and the most difficult part.
Has there been anything about either your leadership of this company or going through the approval process for a device that was surprising to you?
Um, Surprising, I have to say, really grateful for all the accelerator programs that we participated from Imperial, Royal College of Art, Cambridge University. They taught us quite well, I have to say. They trained us to get ready for all these things that will come. Even COVID, I don't think I was too worried or shocked. It was obviously like not something that we predicted, but it didn't it didn't shook us apart, if that makes sense. And I what the key thing that I always talk to the team members is like work like swan. Like the things will always happen, we just stay calm and we resolve them. So I wouldn't say anything was too shocking.
And what advice would you have for a young entrepreneur, somebody who, like yourself, may have a great idea, may have the passion for it, maybe doesn't quite know how to get started or is
Mm,
trying to figure out whether they want to be an entrepreneur inside of a company or they actually want to go and pave their own way. What
mm.
counsel could you give to young people?
I really want to share what I learned from other entrepreneurs who shared it with me is really kind of think about what you really, really want to do. Because if you really understand what you want to do, then you can make it happen. So, for example, as you mentioned, I'm not background from clinician, nor am I background from business person. Um, I'm like a technical founder, but because I was so passionate and I knew what I really wanted to do, I really wanted to bring smiles back for people with Parkinson's. I was able to find a resource to learn and develop myself together with the team to achieve what we are. I do want to mention it's not an easy journey, but the challenge will become easier to go through if you really love what you're doing. And to listen to people who have achieved it, but also really important to listen to people who failed it, will help them to grow themselves into becoming an entrepreneur. For me, I have to say, I'm still massively learning. Like I'm here sharing my story, but every single day I'm learning from the mistakes that I made. But I love the quotes that got shared by one of my advisor is you never lose if you learn from the mistake, so you learned from it and you move on. So yeah, I think it's always constant trying, failing, learning, and then moving on. So I do want to share that.
So the Q1 device, obviously, we've talked a lot about that today. That is the actively being evaluated product. Is there any other treatments or innovation experiments that your company is in the early stages of exploring, or perhaps something you have in mind as a follow-on to the Q1?
Quite a lot, I have to say, and also the progress has been incredible. So we are in development of not only Q2, Q3, but also the platform and also the tremor control device. So we're really hoping that we can bring further more innovation into the sector for the benefit for the improving the quality of life for people with long-term conditions.
And last question for you. I ask all of my guests to try to look into their crystal ball, look into the future, however far you want to project. What is the next big exciting innovation that you see on the horizon, either for the device that you're working through and the field that you're in, or perhaps something outside of your field that you think could have a profound impact on what you're working on today?
Mm. My like the most exciting part is technology getting implemented into healthcare. I have to say, which can then get into more tailored care, making it more accessible, affordable for individuals, so that we can improve the healthcare in total significantly. I see that coming up. Like we will have to work together with like engineers, clinicians, patients and regulation experts and so on. But it will happen. I really hope that we can accelerate so that we can make it available for people who are having difficulties day to day, but also with the quality. So we can't just accelerate without making sure that it is adhering to the efficacy, safety, and the quality. So with that, I'm hoping that we can, improve the quality of life for long-term condition people.
If people would like to learn more about Charco Neurotech or more about you, where can we direct them?
Yes, it is www.com, charconeurotech.com, and they will be able to see the things that we are doing. We do also have a YouTube channel and Facebook groups that you can constantly see what we're doing. And also, you can see people with Parkinson's sharing their stories. We also have open day every month. It is actually happening this Friday, but it's every month, last Friday, where people can join and ask a question about what we are currently doing. We give update to people with Parkinson's and community members monthly about what Sharko's been up to. So they're more than welcome to follow us there and also sign up for the newsletters.
Excellent. Lucy, thank you very much for your time today. Our audience appreciates it. And if there are additional innovations or big approvals or big moments, we'd be thrilled to have you back to talk about those when the Q1 reaches its next stage of development.
Would love to be here again. So thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that episode as much as I did making it. It was a great interview, great conversation. I learned so much, and like all of my podcasts, I feel like I have to go back and listen to that one again, maybe a couple of times, to make sure that I picked up all the little nuances and knowledge transfers that we got to in there. Just such a complex and yet important topic. So I hope that you will all listen to this one again. I invite you to share this podcast, whether this episode or the entire series, with your friends, with your family. If you found this interesting, do us a favor and share. This podcast community is all about curious minds. And if you have a curious mind in your life that you think would enjoy this program, strongly encourage you to direct them to this show as well as to the entire series. You can send folks to my website, brianjmatos.com, where they can get a good overview of the program, listen to a few episodes, get a few sample clips, listen to my introduction to the show. But you can also direct them to any one of my social media channels. You can find me online at Twitter at brianjmatos. You can get clips of this episode as well as all of the others that we have released to date on my YouTube channel, Brian J. Matos Podcast, or you can just search Brian J. Matos in the search bar on YouTube. You can, of course, find us on Facebook. Brian.Matos also can be found on Instagram. And, of course, the podcast itself is available anywhere you get your podcasts, anywhere you subscribe, listen, stream, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Audible, and a whole variety of others. If you're an Apple user, you can find us in the iTunes podcast store as well. So we hope that you will join us again next week when we will be joined by a particularly interesting guest, Josh Penner. He is a mayor. He is also the founder of a artificial intelligence firm that is working in local governments to help them improve their records and policy information management systems. This was a fascinating interview because we covered so many topics ranging from the role of local government in our lives, how artificial intelligence can be used to both benefit and potentially put those local governments in harm's way. And we also covered leadership. We covered some of the basics of the product and service that his company is promoting. And of course, we got to promote a little bit of his city, Orting, Washington, which you'll hear a little bit more about if you tune in for our next episode. So that's Josh Penner. And then in 2 weeks, we have Richard Hollis joining us from London, the CEO of Risk Crew, a London-based cybersecurity risk management consulting firm. So a couple of episodes ago, we covered the topic of cybersecurity in general, but Richard Hollis takes it in a different direction, and he tells us that cybersecurity is a myth. There is no such thing as total cybersecurity. There is only risk mitigation. So whether it's a company that you manage today and you're thinking about this topic, or you're just interested in this space, we thought we would take it in a different direction since we had a lot of great feedback and great downloads from our first episode on this topic with our first guest. We thought we'd bring on another guest to have a different form of conversation. What if you can't keep your company truly secure in an increasingly insecure cyber world? And I think you'll find Richard has given us some really, really interesting insights into the industry that he is a part of, but he has spent more than 30 years of his career in. And there are some great insights in that interview about some of the maybe behind the scenes conversations that take place among professionals in this space about what they can and can't do versus what they are able to sell and talk about to the public. So a couple of great interviews coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, I encourage you all to promote this show to your friends, anybody that you know who's a curious mind who you think would benefit from this information. And this episode in particular, if you know anybody who is suffering from Parkinson's disease or any number of other degenerative diseases that you suspect that this treatment could possibly be beneficial for, I don't know if they're going to want to or be interested in being part of any future clinical trial for this, but even to know that there is some potential hope out there, that there are many people like Lucy who are out there working on degenerative diseases like this to try and improve the quality of life. There's a hopeful message in that. So if of all episodes you want someone to be introduced to this show, what we cover, what we talk about, how we go beyond the headlines and beyond the news, this is one of them. So thank you all for listening again this week. Look forward to hearing more from you, and I look forward to hearing from our listeners on any questions you have. My email is info at brianjmatos.com. My producer and I will take your questions and try to get back to you, and certainly relay anything back to our guests that we weren't able to cover today. Hope you all subscribe. Look forward to talking to you all again in the weeks to come. And as always, I invite you to and encourage you to stay curious.